There'll be champagne on the table and money in the bank, grass in all the paddocks and some water in the tank. There'll be silver on the sideboard and silk next to the skin. There'll be new shoes every Christmas when the ship comes in. There'll be glass in all the windows and butter on the bread, roses in the garden and some linen on the bed. There'll be gravy and potatoes and peaches from the tin. There'll be new shoes every Christmas when the ship comes in.
This is where we loaded sheep onto the train, here at the Hannaford siding. We bring the sheep 20 miles up the Hannaford Road. It'd take 3 days and we'd camp out overnight. Then we'd bring them up here and put them in the loading yards over there. And we used to sleep in the last night in here. I used to roll my swag out and have a sleep. When the train came in at 4 o'clock, we'd all wake up and then we'd start loading the sheep on at first light. It's all looking very desolate. The train doesn't come here anymore. When I was a child, this was one of the richest parts of Queensland. It was wool country, Australia's heartland. It was also my heartland. I loved the bush, but I felt I couldn't stay there. Now I've come back because I want to see what's happened to Hannaford and what's happened to the bush. It's the sort of country we used to celebrate as the birthplace of the Australian identity. It's brigalow country, dry and rugged. It's where settlers like my parents came in the 30s, hoping to make a living from growing wool. They built homesteads like Kington, with dreams of creating gracious living in the vast plains of brigalow scrub. I was the third daughter, after my sisters Wendy and Kay. After me came Sue, and finally a boy, Angus. Sue was the only one of us still stayed on. She married another Hannaford local, Brian Cameron. She still lives in the district and helps manage their property, which is only a few kilometres from Kington. I live in Sydney now and make documentary films. I wanted to spend some time with them, to work out just what it was that made me want to leave.
Probably dry, Brian, you can fold those up. Please.
Oh, any time, Dad.
I'd like to see it on camera.
I thought that was your department.
You know how to work the pegs, Brian? If you just sort of squeeze the pegs together and they come loose.
Peg?
Yeah, that's a peg.
Oh, heavens above. How long have these things been around? This is the financial hub of the business in here, Tony.
Yeah.
Where it all happens. Hasn't been happening much. Unfortunately, there's more goes out that door than comes in this door. You zoom in on the safe when I say that.
The Camerons, that's Brian's family, landed on the Hannaford Road a little earlier than my parents. They had 5 kids too.
I went to school at Hannaford. We used to go on a sulky, which was driven by the eldest whoever.
How many kids were at the school then?
Well, the snobs didn't go there. It was only it was only the ones from up around Hannaford. None of the ones further down the road went. They all had governesses. And when they
But
went
nothing.
to boys' school.
We couldn't get to school on the dirt roads. You were right near the school, you people.
How many kids at the school? Hannaford school, I don't know. There's probably 20, 25, I guess.
We had a string of long-suffering governesses. I remember one in particular, Mary Gallagher from Scotland. Poor Miss Gallagher, we teased her relentlessly. In the summer, the heat and dust got too much for her, and she fled back to Scotland. This is the road from Hannaford to our closest small town, Tara, where the local Wool Princess competition was held. As a teenager, I was an entrant, and so was my sister, Sue. The winners are announced at a gala evening at the end of show week, at the Tara Show Ball. It's now called the Showgirl competition. I guess it's because of the decline of sheep and wool in the area. As we did all those years ago, the entrants rehearsed the day before. Strangely, it still seems exactly as it was 20 years ago. And it still looks as if it would be a pretty nerve-wracking experience for the entrants. This year, everyone is disappointed because they've only been able to find 2 senior entrants. When I was in it, there were at least 10.
I had a lovely partner, just gorgeous, Brian.
Yeah, we had a great experience.
Was he very sensitive?
Yes, well, particularly sensitive. What you do is you go up onto the stage, they tell you who wins, and all the girls have got to come down off the stage and dance with their partners. No one else joins in, they're all around the edge going, you know, mothers and everybody else. So you come down. So I came down the steps with my partner, about to fling myself into a waltz, and he headed straight for the bar. So I had to go and sit with my mother. We all laughed about it, but not enough to make me forget about the most embarrassing and humiliating event of my life. Rebecca grew up near Tara, but she's now working in a law firm in Dalby. Jane comes from Mooney and is training to be a nurse in Toowoomba. When I was in it, I was more or less forced to by my parents. Today, these girls have agreed, out of loyalty to the tradition.
It's quite easy, okay? But what I'm going to do now is turn on some music. So you can- okay?
This is going to be fun.
Start that up now. We'll try again. Under that way.
The competition is very important to the town. It's been going on for over 40 years, and it's somehow symbolic of the community's endurance.
Please don't go anywhere near that other open door because we want it to be a surprise what you look like and, you know, the glamour of everything, okay?
I've been back to the district before, but I could never bring myself to return to the house where we all grew up.
I like the game.
So you look at the hinges, and you open it the right way the first time. Dad used to get really pissed off if you opened the gate the wrong way. A bush girl did not open the gate the wrong way the first time. You see, that's so open. It was just thick scrub the whole way through there. You couldn't see through anything. see, I don't even recognise this country. This is just another place. Jesus, what's that all about? Just stop here, Sue.
It's exactly the same, isn't it?
Well, kind of. Garden's very different, isn't it? Oh, yeah, well.
Well, here we are. Said yes, that tomorrow you were coming, so you caught us completely unaware.
Tomorrow?
He said tomorrow. Did he? He must have got his days and stuff. Got that, he said tomorrow. So we weren't expecting you today. So what do you think about this change? Major changes? Pardon? This is a lot of changes.
How are you, Boo?
Julie and Jack are the sixth lot of people to own Kington since we left. Bush girls aren't supposed to cry, but as I noticed all the changes to the old place, I just fell to pieces. It just seems strange that they should be living here. And there's something really funny about it. It still looks like the bush, and when you look over there and you see the dogs, we had a whole pack of dogs living in hollow logs like that. But the land's been so cleared, I guess that's what it is. It's very strange to see it opened up like that. It was bush, you know. When we were here, it was real bush country. The garden was very important to my mother and her friends. It was as if they were trying to create a wall, a protection between them and the dense scrub. And it gave them something to talk about to help with the isolation. At Kington, I had a profound sense of place. The house and the lagoon formed a totally secure environment. When we lost Kington, I don't think any of us could bear to face then what we'd lost. When we were about 10, we were all sent to a Dickensian boarding school in Toowoomba. On the first day when my mother got up to leave, I panicked and grabbed her around the ankles. A couple of teachers had to come and drag me away. During the holidays, we'd come home from school, but my mother wasn't used to us being there. She just seemed so busy all the time, organising the property and social events. Luckily, my father took pity on me, and I helped him to muster sheep instead of helping my mother with the housework. When we were children, we were told that the Hannaford Road was the longest straight road in Queensland. Our closest neighbours were the Baileys at Westwood, but they were still about 10 miles away. Mr. Bailey was the best man at my parents' wedding. They were like aunts and uncles, and their children, Leith and Donnie and Paul, were like cousins. Like me, Leith moved away and now lives in the city.
Nobbs Lane, I think they call it, or Snobs Lane, the Hannaford Road. That wasn't true. They worked very hard for their standards and community spirit. And it's sad in a way that we were brought up to look down on farmers, blockies, because we were a select group. I mean, it really was a bigoted way of looking at things, but my mother loved going to the bush. And I mean, don't forget, in those days, a city girl landing a landed gentry. And when you look at the little shed she had to go to while the house was being built, but they thought big in those days. I mean, the front veranda at Westwood was 115 feet long, I think. Just an enormous house. There were tennis parties and people from the district would come and we'd be on horses every day. And if I ever had friends home from school and we started our day early cutting sandwiches, packing our little saddle bags with sandwiches, and we'd muster all morning and then stop on the bank of the dam and boil the billy, and city kids coming out to stay just thought this was the greatest adventure and the greatest holiday they'd ever had. My mother was very fragile, I think, after the war, and then she had a baby, my younger brother, and never really seemed to recover. I think the work was hard for her, and my father really didn't see that there was anything that a good hard day's work wouldn't fix. And then she had a major operation, so she died quite young after that. My father really didn't want to know about sickness. I mean, I broke my little finger in a horse accident when we were riding, and Dad looked at it and said, "Oh, we're not running 100 miles with the doctor with every little sprain." And it's been like that ever since. That's stoicism, if you like. He was brought up to a certain set of rules, and he abided by those rules through everything. That's just how we lived our life. It was black and white. I think he was brought up, had to be seen to be tough. My brother was disadvantaged, and he didn't have very much learning ability, and Dad really sacrificed his life for Don. At no stage would he ever send him to a special school or anything like that. He just took it on. He saw Don totally as his responsibility. That's the sort of man he was.
When the two older children left in the 60s, that left Mr. Bailey in the house with Donnie. Without a woman around the place, Westwood fell into disrepair. Women were the mainstay of social and domestic life. It was a massive task that went unnoticed. In fact, it was supposed to be invisible, as if it happened by magic. On the day of the ball, the entrants have come to the nursing home to have their general knowledge and poise assessed by a panel of judges.
Good. These are our showgirls. Don't they look lovely?
The event is held at the nursing home to entertain the residents.
And Ellie Bador. Jane and Rebecca.
I'm Greg Baker's daughter.
Oh, that is you are. That's right.
Yeah, I know Clayton.
Oh, you know Clayton. Oh, yes.
Who are you? Jane Baker. I like playing tennis, walking, socialising.
And just a couple of quick ones. Who's the current president of the United States?
Bill Clinton.
Yeah. And who was the leading Chinese figure that just passed away?
I did hear about it. Don't think I can answer that one, sorry.
Deng Xiaoping, yeah.
Thank you, that's lovely. Thanks, Jane. Thank you
very much.
Well, I know why I didn't join. Because I didn't know what the capital of Chile was. And also, because
What is the capital of Argentina?
we went to the same school. And also because I tripped up the stairs in my orange chiffon frock. That would have been a couple of points down the train. It was strapless.
did you hold it up?
That's a problem for me. So then you have to go in very slowly and you do a slow walk up the whole length of the hall, and the whole district is lined up.
Yeah.
And they're all clapping. So you've got what seems like 1 million people, but it's probably a couple of hundred, 200 or 300, lined up as the girls and their partners make their way graciously towards the stage. You got points for how nicely you walked along. Then you walk up the stairs. Well, I'm trying to gather my orange chiffon frock up, trying to handle my high heels, and I trip, and there's this appalling noise as my knee hits the wooden step. So my partner, Brian Cameron, leans down and says, "What are you doing down there?" I remember so clearly.
Well, it's probably legless.
You were, as a matter of fact. You didn't even stay to give me the first waltz.
I had to go and sit down with the wallflowers.
Whereas, you see, probably...
The worst experience of my life, I tell you.
I think it made me, because I then suddenly became queen. My mother and father rose up with an enormous amount of excitement. For whatever reason I won, I have no idea what they took into account.
It was beauty, darling. It was
Beauty.
beauty.
I suspect it wasn't beauty. I have no idea.
Sue and I talked a lot about what it was that made me uncomfortable in the bush. For instance, when we were little, and they had cocktail parties, and you were in another room, you could hear this amazing noise, a bubble of laughter, a bubble of voices all joining in together with this wonderful small talk. I was a shy girl. They don't like shy people. They like outgoing people. My father was always trying to make me outgoing. How can you make someone outgoing?
Exactly. Yes.
Come on, don't just sit there and say nothing. Come on, go and say hello to Mr. Bailey. I don't know what to say to Mr. Bailey. I wasn't good at small talk. I didn't have that sort of rapport. The strange thing was that my father was just as shy as I was. He didn't talk much, and when he met people, he tended to lift his hat nervously a few times and say, "Hello, hello, hello." And my mother would take over with her unfailing social skills. So one place I knew I had to visit was the woolshed, where I'd spent so much time with my father.
Well, this is 27 years later.
The machinery is long gone, but the ancient stencils for the wool bales still hang on their pegs on the wall.
It's so quiet, and you keep waiting for an activity, keep waiting for something to happen.
Well, it was such a noisy place. This quiet is eerie. This is the engine room. This is where the incredible noise emerged from here. If the engine was still here, it would look totally antiquated today. The engine powered a great big belt, which somehow or other was attached to something here, which turned a big wheel here, and somehow the electricity was passed along and made the combs work, the shearers' combs work. So we had 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. 6 stands, room for 6 shearers. So they'd just unlock the gate, open it up. They'd grab a sheep that they like the look of, probably the one that looked like was quite easy to shear. And they'd just drag it back like this. They'd pull a bit of rope hanging down there, and then they just... So when they finished shearing, they just shear the sheep between their legs, like that, and this pen would be full of Michelin sheep. At Smoko, the bales of wool would become tables and chairs. Someone would boil a billy of tea, and my mother would bustle down with a box of homemade scones and biscuits and cakes. The sun was just starting to go down, and for a moment we both thought we could hear those sheep coming towards us. A mob of sheep used to make the most incredible noise, but it was just our imagination. The families along the Hannaford Road timed it well. The Second World War and then the Korean War created a big demand for wool, and the prices went sky high. Hannaford was prime sheep country, some of the best in Queensland, and my parents became quite rich, along with everyone else in the district.
Everyone in the 50s in wool made money regardless, and there was unbelievable wealth. Good motor cars and a few slow race horses, the odd fast one. Wool was worth £1 a pound, regardless of how good the wool was. My grandfather used to pay we children at Strathalbyn 10 bob a pound to collect dead wool, and dead wool was wool recovered from a dead sheep. You couldn't sort of steal it off a live one. Had to be a dead sheep. So anyway, I can always remember one time that there was a tragedy where a lot of sheep perished, and we thought this was the best thing that ever happened because we could see this fortune lying out there dead.
The centre of Hannaford, the hall and the school, are the only buildings for miles in every direction. The hall is on private land, so it doesn't get government funding. Each year, the community has to find the money for its upkeep and to pay for a full-time caretaker. The Hannaford Hall is also where they hold the Christmas concert and where Father Christmas brings his presents. Yeah, I remember having Santa Claus here.
Did you?
Big event.
Big event, big event.
The other major event in the hall is the ironically named Beach Ball. It's a very different event from the show ball, and it's been held for 50 years now, near Christmas time. This is where I used to sit being a wallflower out here. It was better to sit out here than in the hall because you felt as if you were just taking a spell rather than waiting for a partner. And my friend Hilary Cox was usually sitting with me, and maybe Del Barden. So we'd sit in our nice frocks with our rope petticoats underneath, hoping for the best.
Typical country dancing.
Oh, yeah.
But
Gypsy tap.
Velita, barn dance, waltz, shotties. But now if you talk about those these days, they sort of haven't got much idea of what you're talking about. We've stepped into another generation.
The beach ball is crucial to the community's survival, but each year the struggle to organise it gets harder and harder. This year there are obvious tensions among the volunteers.
Lynn Simpson also brought up the subject that we need to put our parents somewhere.
So they can't get behind the barn. They can't get behind the van.
No, the van's up the other end.
A little coffee urn in here and some...
Have you stood here when the band's playing?
Yeah.
And you expect people to sit in there and talk to each other. They won't be able to talk to each other because you can't hear each other.
They all sit, every year they sit
Yeah,
outside.
they sit out there and be entertained by the activity.
No, it's not. It's cold and miserable and horrible.
I'm going to put that on we'll probably end it. But are you going to go around, are you? Or what? It'll be just, yeah, like out here, Barry, and then, hang on, it's a triangle. So it'll be sort of two wings, and then the front will be here, I'd imagine. That's the other, that goes up there, Barry. Just bring that bend round. And how does that lock in? The way it does go together, Barry.
Yeah, I can see that. That's got nothing to do with it.
No, that's the tail. It's just it's just two wings, Bob. This is the front section.
Well, the wings must, something must put in here. That must
Gotta
be
go
the
back
back
around.
section. That must be the back section.
Back section. We've got to swing it round.
One of these.
Well, I think just...
That's where you want it? You do.
This fence looks over the Gymkhana ground. Here it is again. It's exactly the same place, only it's at the Hannaford Gymkhana 40 years ago.
When you come to the nomination day, would you remember that we have your...
In this small area, there was a tight-knit community. It was stable and it was big. Everyone knew everyone else. Looking at these old home movies, I can't help thinking how relaxed and carefree and happy these people look. When I was a child, we assumed that everything was solid and permanent, that nothing would change, and that we would grow up and recreate the same community. But by the time I was about 16, such hopes were starting to feel a bit shaky. In the 50s, graziers like my parents were a race apart, and their extravagant lifestyles must have been the envy of people that earned a wage, because one of our neighbours found that someone had put sugar in the tank of their flash new car. Not surprisingly, the Queensland Labor government decided to share the wealth. They took away some of the leasehold land